compelling
Okay,
enough?
yeah, well, no. There's potential. There's a heck of a lot of capacity, but you're talking about a lot of capture systems installed on power plants, a lot of new power plants built, a lot of holes drilled, a lot of pipelines built. I see this as, you know, you tackle my own biased opinion, and it is biased, is that you tackle the biggest plants with individual systems. You tackle that first because that's going to make some cuts, some percentage, even if it's a small percentage, but it's also an expensive percentage. It's not cheap. This is not going to come without cost. We have to exploit efficiency, but again, that's not going to happen unless it's legislated and mandated. It just won't unless, because we're just children, all right? All of us as a collective, we're just a bunch of children. We're going to do whatever we please until we're told that we have to do it.
Sure. No, an interesting comparison, just out of comment, might be the undertaking of what's happening in sub-Saharan African areas, where forests are coming back at an exponential rate, although minuscule now.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have on the stack, Ted, you're next, then you, and then you and you. Okay, I'll try to.
You've been calling me Ted for years, which that is not quickly, Professor McPherson, markets can't tell how much oil, can't tell the consumer how much oil or how much natural gas is left. Natural gas produces a large amount of downstream energy for the cities and the US, and I was wondering if you could comment, with this push for natural gas cars and the thought that James constantly brings up where 50% of the homes in the U.S. are heated by natural gas, let alone the fracking problem that is caused by, the techniques of finding more natural gas. Can you comment intelligently on policy regarding that? As a geophysicist.
Intelligently, probably not. I mean, certainly, yeah, I agree with you. The markets themselves tell you one number in terms of how much CO2 or natural gas is in place, and then the resource assessments done by the USGS give you another number. Certainly, to gain either number, this hydraulic fracturing technology, specialized technologies must be used, and it's those very technologies that are those that control the seismicity, right? Because when you induce a fracture, you induce an earthquake, and that's how Halliburton and Schlumberger and other companies have, they spent trillions, literally trillions of dollars developing technologies to maximize this production and maximize the smart fracking, as they call it. It's in terms of policy, coal is cheaper than natural gas right now, at least in terms of a steady price. And unless there's some kind of, and this is where I start to delve into the really non-intelligent part or uninformed part, unless subsidies are put in place to promote natural gas consumption more than coal, it's not going to happen. For my example that I'm drawing on is the California companies who have been presented with the choice of switching to natural gas or staying with coal and sequestering, and they're going with the coal technology because of the economics of the source. I mean, ultimately, in terms of CO2 management, now I'm going to become a politician, like the politicians in their debates and get off track of the original question. It's a portfolio approach is necessary for managing CO2. That means efficiency, that means renewables, it means fuel switching where appropriate, advanced gas technologies, advanced coal technologies, and that's where the economists come in to tell us which are the best. So I'm going to actually punt the ball over to Hans to comment on natural gas economics and policy.
I think let's take the next question.
I'd like to answer a little of that one. I didn't understand the question, but the best data I've seen on our supply of natural gas and oil shows that 95% will be gone. We will be down 95% on production by the end of this century. Okay, Brian didn't get to answer one of my two questions, and I'm helping him remember.
The input.
The input.
So I didn't understand the question, so it's actually a question for you to
Oh, okay.
ask you to re.
All right. When you run a coal power plant, you make a mess in a lot of ways, and you're dealing with part of the output. And now I'm reminding you that coal power plants also carry a burden on the input,
Mining.
the mining. Yeah.
Okay.
Same for nuclear.
Well, and it's, that's, again, that's part of the cost of coal. And as long as policies are in place that, I'll leave it to others to comment whether the policies associated with mining are up to standards, appropriate standards or not. But as long as the current set of regulations are in place, it's still going to remain a cheap fuel source relative to others. So it seems to me it comes back to your comment about, we need to convince the legislators to develop better policies, and that depends on them being informed with what is the best approach, which right now we have such a mixed bag of messages being thrown at the legislators that it then comes back to the community to provide a concerted message. And I, if I keep going, I'm going to be going on to a really cynical track, because one comment I had after my talk on Thursday was, I'd really like a ray of optimism from you. You've come across as really pessimistic about this, really enlightening information, but pessimistic information is the comment that I got from one gentleman after the talk. And the problem is that, to get back to your question of coal mining and handling the input, I don't know what the best answer is. Beyond changing policy and restricting it, which then increases, restricting the mining policies or increasing the standards makes it more expensive, which then forces everyone to look at different fuels. And that gets back to I think this is a very appropriate panel composition, because focused on economics and really fundamental science, and then someone that's working in the field in a niche technology that can comment for better or for worse on some things with an uninformed opinion.
Sounds like what we need is a political consultant. Like how do we as people affect change that makes sense?
Oh, okay, we have two more people here on the stack. If someone else wants to get on the stack on here, I got a couple questions from someone who has to leave. Permit me to put this in here. Two questions. I have heard that carbon sequestration can be in liquefied form. How feasible is this? Does this mitigate problems that might be caused by earthquakes, for example? That's one question for Brian.
Can we start off with that? Just start with that, or do you want to? Okay, yes. I'll start with that. The form of geological carbon sequestration that we're working on is using liquefied CO2, and actually water is incompressible. And in the late 60s, the Army injected wastewater into a field near Rangeley, Colorado that induced some rather large earthquakes. Right, magnitude 4 and 5 that was felt in Denver. Right, so that was the first study, I think, that forced a lot of scientists from different parts of the community to come together and evaluate, well, can earthquakes be controlled? And it's from those experiments, that research, that I think Halliburton and some of these other companies made their bread and butter. They made the biggest chunk of their, base prop money, or built themselves as companies by leveraging that technology to create smart fracking and controlling, basically controlling the seismicity. But to get back to the point, water is an incompressible fluid effectively. That's why when it's injected, causes, you can actually make more effective predictions of seismicity. CO2, when it's liquefied at the depth of a typical storage reservoir, sequestration reservoir, is it's supercritical, which is